This isn't a spreadsheet. This isn't a document to look at on a computer or numbers to throw up on a whiteboard. It's my life.
Hi, my name is Catherine Hubert. This is my business, Chez Genèse, where I am the restaurant owner, chef, and disability integration coach.
Hey everybody, welcome back. We're in my house again today. It is my day off. It is Monday, which I usually try not to do any work on, but truly just have not been able to stay caught up at work the past several weeks. Probably noticed that as a consistent theme in our videos and also in our posting frequency and schedule this past month. So we're in my house. It's a little bit of a cozier vibe, which may feel antithetical to the fact that I'm talking about what does a restaurant owner actually make, which feels maybe a little bit more intellectual and like I should be sitting at a desk looking at spreadsheets. But the fact of the matter is, this actually feels pretty appropriate because as a small business owner, this is my life, right? Like this isn't a spreadsheet. This isn't a document to look at on a computer or numbers to throw up on a whiteboard. It's my life, and my personal life and my home life is very much impacted by my work life, and what I make or what I don't make very much impacts my personal life, and it impacts me on an emotional way too. So we're a little bit cozier today. We're settling in. It's a little dreary outside, so I'm sitting by a window, and we're going to talk about what it's like, a sneak peek or some of my own behind the scenes of being a business owner, being a restaurant owner, and what the past 6 years of both of those things have looked like for me in terms of financial stability, startup costs, and then where we're at today. All that being said, welcome. It's so nice to have you here today. If you're watching this just because you're someone who follows us and you're interested in hearing more, so happy to have you here. If you are someone who is finding me for the first time and you are thinking about becoming a business owner or starting up a restaurant, I hope this information is helpful to you. And if you already are one of those two things, then just know that I feel it with you, that you're not alone in that. It can sometimes feel very isolating to be a business owner. At least that's something that I have found to be the case. It can be hard to just keep going sometimes. And so hopefully you find a little bit of encouragement through this video and through this channel here today. Also, this is Avery. She's currently keeping me company next to me and sleeping. Hopefully she'll be quiet for us. So let's dive in. I am 36 years old. I started my first official business just right before I turned 30. I say official because I think I'm an entrepreneur by nature. I've had many different little businesses since I was a kid and throughout my teenage years. But first official one in terms of I had a name, I had a logo, I have an EIN number, I do my taxes for my business, I am registered with the city, with the Register of Deeds, like official. There's all the paperwork in place, right? It's not just me selling stationery, although that was my first little business. But first official business right before I turned 30 years old. So I've spent all of my 30s as a business owner and more specifically as a restaurant owner. My business is a restaurant called Chez Genèse, which is a French-inspired cafe. We're in Greensboro, North Carolina. We are open daily from 8 to 2, so 6 hours of operating time every day. We have an integrated hiring model, which means that 50% of my staff have disabilities and 50% are non-disabled. We do breakfast and lunch. We're most known for our brunch on the weekends, and we also do some catering and events. We do some workshops, some cooking workshops, and then we have an educational and advocacy piece of what we're doing. This YouTube channel is part of that, but I also am a keynote speaker and then lead workshops and sessions with big businesses and organizations who are wanting to make their spaces more inclusive and adaptive to people with disabilities. So that's kind of our business in a nutshell. Some of those other things have been added on throughout the years. It started out really mostly focused on restaurant life and culture. If you ever worked in a restaurant, it's a hard industry to work in. If you've ever owned a restaurant, it's a hard industry to be a business owner in. If you're looking to do one of those things, and something that I was interested in for a while, you hear from people, you don't go into the restaurant business if you want to be rich. And I would say, yes, that is true. And I hope that changes at some point in the future, because I do think that the service industry as a whole is undervalued in our society, and that honestly, eating out should cost more than it does, which maybe feels like a ridiculous thing to say in this day and age with inflation. But the people who work in the service industry oftentimes aren't paid very much. And so the prices that we are seeing for our food still a bargain. You're still getting a pretty good deal for what it actually costs and takes for someone to do the work of growing your food, for someone to do the work then of preparing your food and coming up with the creative ideas and menus that you're seeing, and then for someone to actually serve it to you and bring it to your table and take care of you. Hopefully we'll see that trajectory change in the coming years. That being said, what was it like when we first started out? So I'm going to kind of take you back to the beginning, and then we're going to talk about now. It's not been a very linear journey. It's not been a flat line like, oh, we've just sustained it. It's also not been a trajectory up that just, you start here and then it's just a roadmap to success from there. Like income increases, profitability increases, all of that. It's not been the case. It's very much, one of these things. And to be perfectly honest, at the moment, I'm down here. Like I'm not in an upswing at the moment, financially or emotionally. I almost didn't make this video because of that. I knew that this was on the schedule to create this video, and then I was like, I'm actually feeling pretty discouraged about things at the moment. I don't know that I really want to go on and talk about it. And then I realized that might be the reason why I could or should come on and talk about it, because that is a really present part of my reality as a business owner. There are lots of down swings that you experience. There are a lot of times where I have to really dig back in and be like, why am I doing this? What keeps me going? What needs to change? What needs to shift? Is our business still operating the way that it needs to? And so it would not paint a very realistic picture, honestly, of what my life or my business looks like if I came on here and I was just like, yeah, it's great. Here's what I invested, and then it's just been great since then. Like, that's not been the case. That being said, what has it looked like? It cost about $110,000 in startup costs initially to get this restaurant off the ground. I put in about $20,000 of my own capital. I crowdfunded, so I had a Kickstarter campaign that was another chunk of that startup costs. Received some donations from family members and friends who were just like, we really are excited about what you're doing and we want to see it happen. Here's the money to help get it going. I applied for grants that was part of that startup costs as well, and then took out some personal loans. So there weren't any banks or investors, big investors, who wanted to invest in my business, because I was a 29-year-old woman who was starting up a restaurant that employed people with disabilities, and that was not marketable to very many people, which really is unfortunate. But got started nonetheless. And then when we first opened, I was truly making pennies. And I say that not as a metaphor or not as an exaggeration. I was making less than $1 per hour when you calculated how much I was actually able to pay myself a month and how many hours a week I was working. I was working about 136 hours a week when we first started, and I worked every single day for the first 3 months before I took a day off, which was a Monday. And here we are on a Monday, which I still take off. And that's become a very sacred day for me and has been a big part of me actually being able to sustain myself just physically and emotionally in this industry. But we saw, I think, you start a business and you don't really know who's going to come. You hope that people are going to come when the doors open. I'm really grateful that people did come to our business. Our primary form of marketing when we opened was word of mouth, and I had been working strategically towards word of mouth advertising for the year before we opened, and I would say that paid off. We saw over the first year that we were open a steady increase in terms of the numbers, like the number of people that we were serving on a daily basis. And then we also realized we set the menu prices, I set the menu prices too low initially. And so that was something that we started changing and playing with within the first, 3 to 6 months of being open, changed some of our prices. So we did see our income change quite a bit over that first year. It almost doubled the sales that we were doing from the beginning of that year to the end of it. And then we were 15 months old and the pandemic happened, and we shut down completely for 6 weeks, and then we reopened in an adapted way. It's hard when your business model is very much based on a brick and mortar business, and also we're breakfast food, which means a lot of eggs, and that doesn't travel well. So trying to switch to takeout with like the menu that we had didn't really make a lot of sense, and it didn't make a lot of sense for the hours that we needed to have either. Anyways, pandemic hit, we switched significantly. We saw a 50% decrease in our income, but we did receive some grants and some loans at that point that were more economic and disaster relief related. That actually helped my personal income quite a bit. I had, up until that point, we were 15 months old when the pandemic hit. Those first 15 months, I was still paying myself very inconsistently. It was sporadic. It was not very much. Those grants and those loans actually, as much as it was hard to see the income for our business go down so much, we had some reliable income that came through those grants and loans, and I was able to pay for myself personally out of some of them too. It obviously also went to my staff and towards keeping the business alive, but it also helped sustain me during that period, which was really helpful personally and something that I hadn't been able to do through the business before. But to be perfectly honest, like, we're 6 years old, about to be 6 years old, and the pandemic, that was 4 years ago, and we're still recovering from the losses that we took during that time. We haven't completely pulled out of it yet. So it's been a really long recovery process. We reopened, we had an adapted model. The cost of living went up over the course of that time. The price of food went up over the course of that time. So trying to come back in and then reestablish and reground, that was a rocky point. And then I feel like over the past 2 years, there has been a greater sense of stabilization. We've also, not until last year did we actually have any data from the year before that was useful, because the first 5 years of our business, every year looked so different from the last that you couldn't be like, what's this July going to be like? Let's look back at last July. It's like, oh, well, last July we were closed. Like, okay, the July before that was our first July. Like, there were so many different factors that made it hard to even plan or prepare. But overall, the past 2 years, we've stabilized a little bit more. So what does that look like for me? That looks like I, for the most part, have been able to pay myself. And I changed the way that I do that to where I take a percentage of the income of the business rather than trying to have a set salary amount. So my income does fluctuate based on how well the restaurant is doing, which means that when we're closed, I'm not making any money. It means when business is bad, I'm not making as much money. It means if business is really good, I make a little bit more. So it's been helpful to do that. But then recently been in a spot where that percentage that would normally go towards me has needed to go back towards other operating expenses or to pay my team. And so then that's really been really discouraging to feel like, you know, I'm in a business that's almost 6 years old and I still am not able to pay myself consistently, and I'm still putting a lot of work into the business. I'm not going to disclose my specific salary, one, because I don't actually have a specific salary. Like I just told you, I take a percentage, so it does change. I will say that starting here, making less than $1 per hour to where I am now, like I have grown. There's been an increase, and I've been really thankful for that. But there still is a very real and present financial stress that I experience on a business side and on a personal side, which impacts so many different areas of life. But that was something else that I wanted to talk about today, and I'll kind of close out with that. It's very easy, I think, to look at success and to look at our resources as strictly money-based or financially driven and forget about all the other resources or other markers or metrics for success that we have. So in terms of resources, the things that I think about and use are resources are money. It is important and it is helpful, but also time, energy, and emotional capacity. Those are the primary things that I look at as resources. There also are some elements of like physical property too as being a resource. Recently, there's some dishes that I had here at my house that I really do like, but I realized I just let them sit in the cupboards so that they look pretty, and I've taken those into the restaurant, and some have gotten broken, but mostly are still there. But it's like I'm actually using them instead of just letting them sit around and collect dust. So there's some element of that being a resource too. But time, energy, emotional capacity are things outside of money that are also really important, and I utilize and use regularly as a business owner. And then in terms of success, what does success look like? Obviously, an increase in pay can be a metric of success, and I can look back at our business and be like, okay, the income that we're bringing in has grown. That can be a metric of success. I'm paying myself more now than I was when we started. Well, that's a low benchmark, but I'm paying myself more now than I was when we started, so that can be a metric of success too. But if I'm using that as the only metric of success, then it's very easy to be discouraged, because then there are weeks where I don't make as much, or there are weeks where I don't make anything at all. And if that's my only metric for success, then it can be very easy to then feel like a failure. Obviously, it's still a metric of health for me. It's a metric of how healthy and how sustainable is my business. And I do use our finances to really do a gauge and to check in and are we being efficient? Are we being smart with our resources? Are we wasting things? Are we charging what we need to charge for our products? Where do we need to grow? Are we utilizing our staff in the most productive ways? Like, it helps me really take a gauge on the overall health of what our business is. But there are other metrics for success too. I think personal fulfillment and how happy am I in my role is a good metric, which is a little bit harder to gauge, but like, how much is my team and how much are our guests enjoying services that are provided, the work environment that is there? Are people connecting with it? Are they resonating with it? Are we seeing new guests? Are we seeing returning guests? Like, those are also metrics. Are people leaving us reviews? Are they talking about it with their friends? Is that word of mouth marketing that we started out using, is that still applicable now? And recognizing too that in seasons where it's like, okay, there isn't anything, or it feels like there's nothing, being able to look around and assess like, but are we in the same place that we were the last time that I felt like I had nothing? What else do we have now that I didn't have then, even if this component maybe feels the same? So all that being said, what does a restaurant owner actually make? It varies. Maybe not the answer that you were looking for, but it's, I would say, on our best days, best years, I make an average income. On our bad days, I make a below to sometimes very below average income. There have been times that I've lived truly at the poverty level as a business owner. So don't go in it to be rich. Hopefully someday people who work in the restaurant industry can be rich, that our culture has changed that way. But what other richness is already present in our lives? And that's the thing that I think I'm focusing on the most. And I would say I also don't feel completely content in. So that's something that I'm also doing some internal reflection and digging on, is where is this being fulfilling? Is this the life that I want to live? Oh, there's a bug. What needs to change? And how do I practice gratitude for where I'm at in the present, while also recognizing that the creative aspects of who I am are always going to push for something to be better and to push into the potential and the beauty that I see in the world. So, questions, thoughts, comments, leave them below. Thank you for being here today. Thanks for being part of this community. I'll catch you next time. Chez Genèse, teammates, and guests. Your keyword for this week in honor of this little one over here is Avery.